I have to get into this because this is just like, as we're talking about consequences and evolution of magic systems, it's just, I have a point here, and it's just amazing with what I saw. One of my favorite shows is One Piece. It's an anime from Japan, and it's insane, and you know it, Weege. It started in, 1997, 1996, and it is still running. And it's not even half over yet. The magic system in One Piece revolves around a devil fruit. It is literally Pirates of the Caribbean meets Marvel Comics, meets the Avengers. That is how I describe this show. It is a pirate on the seas, and he's got this treasure that he's looking for, but you have the ability to eat this thing called a devil fruit, and it will give you a magic power. If you die, the devil fruit reforms, and anyone else can go in, and there's only one skill, one magic per devil fruit. So there's only one fire fruit. There's only one gum fruit. And one of the characters, Nico Robin, she has the flower fruit. The first time you see Robin use her magic powers, she can levitate magic. And she's on the ship, she's talking to the main character, and you see her pick up his hat with telekinesis, and the hat floats to her. And it's the only time you see that power. From there on, the author corrected it, and I think he went, oh, there's too many, that's too easy. And what he changed her power to instead is the ability to blossom her body parts out of anything she sees. An eyeball can appear, her hands can appear anywhere. But it was really interesting. Every time I go back to that first episode where she uses her magic powers, and there's like probably 500-600 episodes with this character. So you were used to her using that flower fruit, but for that one episode, randomly, she's telekinetic. It's very, very interesting how you see him. And they can't go back and correct this. They can't go back and fix the anime. So there it is. You can see an author making a very clear magic mistake. And it just... Yeah.
Unlike the rest of us, where we have the privilege of actually going back and being able to do a second edition or a revised. I mean, I hate to George Lucas things from time to time, but like Rosemary was saying with exposition and stuff, one of the worst things you can do is go back in and try and correct something through exposition, or try and explain something too much. Yeah. One of the reasons I do my short stories is simply because I had this novel I was working on, and so much exposition wanted to come back out. And a lot of it relates to the background and the magic and, all the systems that revolved around the stories I'm writing. But they were slowing down the progress of the story too much. And I think that's going to be my answer to the exposition question. Is there too much exposition? When it takes you out of the story that's in progress to the point where the reader is going, okay, this probably should have been a different story.
Yep.
I think that's where the omniscient point of view comes in. And one of the things that I did to handle it is actually I reserved a lot of my exposition for the second book. For the first book, I spent a lot of time just training the reader to, this is how it is. Just take it and make sure the consistency is there. A couple times she stops to describe it and explain it, and I think I hopefully did a good job telling the reader it's coming, just go with the story for now.
Yeah. I think we got a lot to learn from science fiction on that front.
Yeah. And
science fiction says science fiction has this thing, it works.
Yeah. Just go with it. Yeah. And in the second book, it got to the point where what I did, she's mixing a potion, and I believe what did you call it, Richard, with fantasy, science fantasy, where you enchant, you put magic into an object, it's enlightening.
Yep, enlightened science fantasy.
Enlightened science fantasy. She basically takes runes, and this is how I really have a problem with magic spells, because I could sit there and say Avada Kedavra all day long and no one would drop dead. So what is the difference between Voldemort saying it and anybody else? And it never really sat with me. Why does abracadabra suddenly have power? It's just a word. So what I did in my book, when she writes out the runes, she actually has to stop and give it a spell. and use enlightenment on the runes itself. So now she has magic runes. What I did for the exposition on that is while she is working through the spells, I've got this imagery happening for the reader so that they can see everything she's doing. And I put somebody, I did the Hermione. That's exactly what I call it, the Hermione. You put somebody ignorant next to the reader, and you put the Hermione in there, and you have the Ron going, okay, I don't quite get it. What are you doing? And then the Hermione comes in, well, I read this book, and this is how this is done. So you've given a visual that's entertaining for the reader. You have a character who is in the same position as the reader going, what are you doing? I don't get it. And you have a character that's advanced, like Hermione, having to break things down into smaller, simpler terms for the common man who doesn't know the stuff. And it's done naturally.
I go even farther back. I attribute the origin of that to Robin, the character Robin. Before Robin, Batman was just walking around and every panel was a thought bubble from Batman going like, that's where the key is. That's where the lock is. That's where the bad guy is. So Robin was invented to do one thing and one thing only. Holy rusted metal, Batman, how did you know that? So then you can go, well, Robin, let me tell you how smart I am. And off he would go. And that's why it was existed. So you have your Robin characters, and then you have Obi-Wan, where I don't know how to do what you want me to do. Well, let me teach you. So you have your mentor archetype, and then you have Robin. Either way, you inevitably have someone who's paid there to do what every fan is doing while they're reading. How the heck is that happening?
Yeah, well, actually, you're right, because Robin was actually created to appeal to the younger comic book readers. So he is essentially the reader in the story.
Yeah.
Iron Man is better than Batman.
No, he's not.
I'm really biting my tongue this year. I'm like, I just
I
bought
gotta
it
head
the
back to
19th.
the office.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned Hermione and characters like Batman and all the rest of them, because you've got Hermione is actually a very interesting, unexpected mentor character in a lot of respects, because she's got that advanced knowledge. She's capable of so much more than, and isn't necessarily being pushed as far as she could be as a character, because she's playing that mentor role.
Yeah.
And I think that may, in some respects, have been a mistake, because she could have been more integral in so much more of the plot lines. But then again, you come back and you've got characters who play those roles, and you sit then looking at them and you go, okay, so this character knows all this, but where did they learn it? And
Rowling actually made a comment about that, and I love the way she summarized it. Anytime Hermione opened her mouth, you could assume that she just read it in a book somewhere. And for me, it worked. For me, I was fooled every time. She opened her mouth and, of course, she read it somewhere. It was probably in Hogwarts of history.
I think it only works because we're talking about a young adult book. I think if that was an adult book, that doesn't work at all, does it? I mean, come on.
I suppose.
I mean, Hermione's not an author. She doesn't necessarily she does all the research and then doesn't do anything really with it until it comes out.
I would argue
stories.
What matters is...
I find Hermione, I find it a rather disappointing character. I mean, as a woman, I find it a disappointing character, but I mean,
she was underutilized.
Yeah.
She was underplayed in too many places, and had to take a back seat to the star of the series, when really she could so easily have solved so much of the plot problems.
I'm sorry, she punched the crap out of Malfoy. She wins in my book.
I think the films rescued her, if we're going to put it on.
But then they didn't show her biggest strength, which is which is, in a lot of respects, is her compassion for others outside the human race. I mean, one of the biggest things you've got with Hermione in the books is very simply her compassion for the house elves and her whole crusade.
Yes. True.
That's completely missing from the films.
Yeah, and it really took a lot away from her character.
I think so. Again, it's coming back to that she's underplayed.
Yeah, they hurt her a lot when they made that cut. And I think of all the movie cuts, all 7 movies, that was the one that really hurt her hard.
The thing that Rosemary was talking about with the reader buying... I think the reader will buy the mentor character as long as you're able to convey to the reader why they're an expert. Now, you tell a bunch of young readers that, well, she reads a lot, and young readers are like, sure, everything must be in books. if you're going to use the mentor archetype, you have to demonstrate his expertise in some way. And I associate a lot of this relationship, the mentorship protege relationship, to old Japanese and Chinese martial art movies. Because inevitably what happens is the guy shows up and the dude shows up, and the way he establishes that I'm really good is I'm going to beat you up with no effort.
Yeah.
And then because I can beat you up with using my one pinky, or I'm not gonna like let go of my T, or whatever I do, look how much easier this is for me. So then when he goes, now paint the house, the guy's gonna be like, well, I guess I'm gonna do whatever he says because I've seen him do this thing and it's impressive.
Yeah.
To me, that's the Obi-Wan in the cantina moment.
Yeah. And I have to like bring this into it. You mentioned the Eastern films. My husband watches the 1950s, 1940 Kung Fu films. So we see a lot of Bruce Lee, And you mentioned the T, and yeah, I've seen so many of those films. I absolutely, this is the Star Wars, the old Eastern movies there with that mentor type. And I'm going to pull from what I've just learned from Tai Chi. And I've been taking Tai Chi for about 6 months now. And it's funny because when I first started, I walked in there and I'm just like, right. Because it's the art of slow movement. And one of the first things I learned after a few classes was how much it pulls on the Kung Fu Panda movies with the Chi. And I was kind of like, I saw the parallelisms and I'm like, this is interesting. And I'm not sure how familiar everyone is, but the Chi is your internal energy. It's your chakra if you're into the Hindu religions, if you're familiar with that practice. And it's the energy that flows through you. It is the force. And one of the things that I really pull on this when they talk about the energy is, again, anime, sorry guys, Naruto and the chakra there. So you see a lot of that same energy flow, the same points of interest are points of energy that flow. And when I built my magic system, I pulled 100% from that concept of that chi, that energy that flows through everything. And pulling it from, there is a mentorship. There really is that with the Eastern thought, how that does pull in. And you see that carried over to the Star Wars movies, very much so. The master. Go ahead.
You also mentioned something else. I do this with my world building. Mm-hmm. I'm very much interested in moving the plot forward. Mm-hmm. And I used to have to go back and do a whole draft just to throw in world building. So the only way I could get around it was to put my world building up front as part of my creation cycle. Mm-hmm. And I do it with my world building where I'm like, well, I don't want to think about this. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this culture and just bam, you're officially aliens. And then add a few twists and whatnot, but really I'm going to borrow from this. And you can do that with magic systems too, where you say, okay, I'm going to base my magic on this concept, on the concept of chi, or on this. And so if a young writer is out there and he's really struggling to how am I going to make my magic system interesting, one thing you can do is take something that's out there and known and either establish an interesting restriction or an interesting consequence, and then add in whatever you want your magic to be. So if you want it to be flight, then add it to flight. But you're still allowed the liberty of making it there, so long as you're using those rules to base what you're working off of. And it's a very well, I do it, so I don't think it's a cheat code, but it's a very quick way to find a platform to work with, so that you can build from something that's known. If you're not as creative and I'm sorry, it sounds mean when you say if you're not creative, but it's okay to have limitations in your ability or in your context. It's all right if you understand what those are. I need something to start with, and I can end with something that's very different, but I need a spark when it comes to my settings. With my magic systems, I'm like, no, that comes up, and I have more trouble adding restrictions. One of the projects I'm working on, I work on a lot of projects. One of the projects I'm working on, the problem I have with it is what I call the Bleach syndrome, or also the Dragon Ball Z syndrome.
Yeah.
At some point in time, when you have this story and this arc based on the character of the power of the main character, at some point in time, it goes all the way back to Knight Rider. every episode of Knight Rider, Kit is charging toward a precipice.
Yeah.
And he's like, Michael, I've never jumped this far before. And then he hits some button, and Kit makes it just a little farther than he did the episode before. And I promise you next week he'll jump that much farther. And it works for a certain amount of time. But at some point in time, the big fear I have in this case is the reader going to buy off on this?
It's the Bugs Bunny showdown for the Barber of Seville when Bugs comes out with the small gun, Fudd comes back with the bigger gun, and it ends in a marriage. So, but yeah, it's you can only one up so many times before it just you really. Yeah, that is the science and the marketing appeal of the success of the desensitization that we see in our culture today. It's because it started off with, well, let's just kick that up a notch. Let's just push it a little bit further. Let's one up our last episode. And I'm sorry, Walking Dead did that. Absolutely.
I think one of the things you can always look at is once you reach a certain point of one-upping, you have to evolve it beyond to something else.
Like in Naruto.
Like, I mean, I think the way I look at it, I go back to what we were discussing earlier with the chi and everything. One question we had earlier was, what's the difference between those who are capable of using magic and those who aren't, and why are certain words powerful in someone's hands and not others?
Yeah.
It's an awareness issue. You've got the whole world of Harry Potter. You've got the Muggles. The Muggles are basically unaware that magic exists, therefore they can't believe it, whereas the wizards are born to magic. They learn it through family, or they learn it, in Harry's case, through more accident than anything else. So they get that awareness as they come up through life. They become aware of it. Like Angela, you're becoming now aware of the chi and what you can do with it. It plays to that very much in my answers to that question. That's the big difference. It's an awareness thing. Some are born into an awareness, or are more capable because of their birthright of becoming aware.
And in fact, there are some, one of the big questions of this is whether, because we've kind of talked about magical systems as this kind of all-encompassing thing. And in fact, one of the big decisions is, well, actually, is magic all-encompassing, or is it an incursion? Is it an attack? Is it something that only belongs to one section? Is it a two-tier? Is it a caste system? In fact, it being something that's an all-encompassing is actually only one of the decisions.
With my series, The Camelot Immortals, the magic is actually kind of a curse, as well as being a power, because it makes you immortal. And it kind of like but the characters didn't want to be immortal. It was just something they weren't told when they started doing the magic, and they ended up with it. And it's sort of like this thing they've had to, this burden, especially the main character, they've had to carry. And so that's what I'm doing on that. And it's an interesting to try and make the magic not just a help, but also a hindrance.
Yeah. I do want to take a moment and go through everyone's magic systems. I'm really, really eager to compare. What are you working on? I'd love to know what everyone's doing for their magic system. Tim, you had something to add?
I do. I was actually going to come and address that directly with what I was going to say next anyway. So I'll go ahead and I'll start. My magic system, basically the entire mythology of the Shadows over Seattle system is based on Fae bloodlines and the way they're intermarried with human bloodlines. So right at the top tier, you've got Fae. They're ancient, they're powerful, they pretty much can do anything. Within certain reasons. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't want to upset the balance of the world by doing too much. The humans are at the opposite end of the spectrum. They have almost nothing. They have no awareness. But then by various levels of crossbreeding over the years, Fae breeding with humans, you get the wizards. So you've got the great wizards, who are basically characters like Merlin, Gandalf, all the big power types. They are, at the end of the day, the pinnacle of human magic capability. Then coming down from them, you get the basic wizards, who are the everyday hedge wizards. They are the guys who think I'll go with Harry Dresden. They're capable of a certain level of magic, but no more, because of the limitations of what their understanding is. Their blood isn't as pure fey as the great wizards was, so there are limitations to what they can physically manifest in terms of raw power. And then below them, we're calling them the psychics. Basically, they are like hedge wizards. They are the telepaths, the empaths. They basically have kind of caught one power set, as it were. So you've got and the understanding of the wizard of how, or in a lot of respects, is how they see the world will affect what kind of powers they are capable of. So someone who's got a great understanding of personalities and emotions will be more likely to be an empath than a straight telepath or a pyrokinetic. Someone who understands the physics behind how everything works, or the chemistry, might be capable of transmutation or straight up pure power. So the outlook of the character and their training will greatly affect what they can and can't do, and is actually a limitation on what they are going to be capable of. And then through various other things, we got all the shapeshifters, because of the different branches of the Fae and all the rest of those, and they are in many respects just a shapeshift. The shapeshifters are basically just a specific type of mage. They are capable of nothing more than shapeshifting. They don't get anything special from it. They know that they are human to wolf. That is effectively their level of power. So we kind of tiered it off based on bloodline. Yeah.
Yours is sounds like a genetic magic system. Richard, I do see that you've joined us. You're driving, so I don't want to. I'm very cautious about driving and being on the phone. It looks like you've got it propped up, so you're not actually on the phone. But can you talk?
Yeah, I can talk.
Okay. I don't know how long you have with us, so I do want to give you a turn while you're with us. Can you go ahead and describe your magic system that you work with in your books?
Yes, of course. So my magic system is very science fantasy based. Sci-fan is the term I use. So the basis, there's an ancient magic. Well, actually before that, technically, there's an ancient darkness. The darkness is called the Leviathan. The Leviathan is the greatest enemy of God. Now, when God divided the light from the darkness specifically is the Leviathan, and it's a mass of darkness, evil. It consumes souls. It's the only way that it can survive, by consuming souls. Now, this is ancient history. It's an alternate version of our history, and so back in early history of the Earth, there was a great city that was built called Atlantis. In the city of Atlantis, it was actually developed by Enoch. So Enoch was the founder of Atlantis, and Enoch and all of his followers were the inventors of the world. They were escaping of Seth and Cain, who had become very wicked. Now, by building the city, it wasn't just a city, it was also a machine. They had been granted knowledge from God, a technology to be able to warp dimensions. And they created these obelisks all around the land of Eden. And these obelisks were magical and also a form of technology that had not yet been discovered. In this system, they created this machine right at a time when all of the earth, the warriors of Cain and of Seth, were attacking on all sides. They activated the machine, and in the process, while they were trying to attack, one of the obelisks actually shattered, leaving. And so they transported from Earth. So what modern scholars would consider Pangea. If you look at any rendition of Pangea, the bottom right corner of that of Pangea is C, the Tethys C. In my story, that actually used to be land. That land existed. And when they activated the machine, it transported that land, the land of Enoch, to another world called Zion, and leaving a giant crater. All of the warriors that were trying to attack, most of them drowned because of the tidal waves that came in and filled the void. And ultimately, God was very upset that they did this, that so many people had died because of this. So he commanded Enoch's son, Methuselah, to go back to Earth, and his blood was fused with an ancient race called the Nephilim, and with that, the Malachim and Nephilim, that was a different part of the story. And with that, he became the first seraph. Every 500 years, there's a new seraphim, and their purpose, they are the guardians of the world, and we know them as Moses, Noah, Enoch, Enos. Every 500 years, a new one came to protect the earth. Well, the last 1,000 years on Earth, and they have magical powers. They can teleport between each world. They are the king of the other world. They are also leaders on Earth. And the last 4 seraphim that exist were also known as the 4 horsemen. The first one was John the Beloved. His purpose was to create unity. He ruled with a crown and a bow. The second one one of his unique powers is he can read telepathically. He can read thoughts. Excuse me, and he doesn't die. He can't die. He's still alive to this day. He's one of the main characters in my story. Now, the second was Attila the Hun. So, ruled with a magical sword. That sword is also known as the Sword of Mars. The third was brain's not working. I'm trying to drive here. Was Alexios Komnenos of the Byzantine Empire, and ultimately he was killed by the fourth. The fourth is Timur Demion, aka Tamerlane. For those historians out there, you might recognize that name. He actually killed his successor, became the new Seraph, and he is currently the Seraph. He's now nearing his 500 age. And now we come to where the story starts. My story starts in modern, well, technically, slightly in the future, and the entire magical system is based off of this historical past, all of the history behind. And you don't learn that until much later in the story. But primarily, the biggest part of the science fantasy magic that's involved is Timur Demion. He is now the CEO of a company called Cyberbolt Entertainment. He is the biggest gaming industry in the world, the biggest gaming platform. This is the basis of this is Lit RPG. If you've heard of that, it's actually extremely popular right now, and it's blowing off the shelves. Amazon bestseller right and left. Now, this gaming system is designed. It's an augmented reality, and it's designed using gamma ray technology. Gamma ray frequency ID chips, or nanochips, GFID, aka similar to an RFID, and some ducks on the road. Okay. Something had to stop. Come on, you can go. Anyway, so these nanobytes were introduced by the NSA. The NSA has coincided with the Centers for Disease and Control, and now everyone basically in the world has been inoculated via immunizations with these microscopic nanochips. The purpose is for the NSA to track everyone, to know where everyone is at all times, to know everything they know about them. And what the NSA doesn't know is Timur Demyan was the founder and the originator of this technology.